The key wouldn't turn. I jiggled it, twisted harder, even tried the old lift and turn trick that sometimes worked when the lock got sticky in humid weather. Nothing. My key, the key that had opened my apartment door every day for the past 3 years, suddenly didn't fit. I pressed my ear against the door and heard movement inside. Someone was in my home. I stood frozen in the hallway of my apartment building, exhaustion from my 12-hour hospital shift still weighing on my shoulders, my scrubs still bearing the faint smell of antiseptic. All I'd wanted was a hot shower and my bed. Instead, I was locked out of my own apartment at 8 p.m. with someone inside. "Hello?" I called, knocking firmly. "This is Eliza Parker. You're in my apartment." Footsteps approached the door. When it swung open, I found myself face to face with my younger brother, Connor. His 6-foot frame blocked the doorway, his blue eyes, the same shade as mine, regarding me with casual indifference. He was dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt that I recognized as one I'd bought him last Christmas. "Hey, Liz," he said, as if this was completely normal. "Didn't expect you home yet." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Connor? What are you doing here? And why doesn't my key work?" He shrugged, stepping aside to let me in. I had to change the locks. The old ones were garbage. I stepped into my apartment and froze. It wasn't my apartment anymore. My carefully arranged furniture had been pushed against walls or replaced entirely. My soft, cream-colored throw pillows were gone, replaced by black leather ones. A massive gaming setup dominated what had been my reading nook. Empty beer bottles and takeout containers littered the coffee table. The subtle lavender scent I maintained with candles and diffusers had been overwhelmed by the smell of stale beer and pizza. "What have you done?" I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. I turned in a slow circle, taking in the transformation. "Connor, what is this?" "I moved in," he said simply, flopping down on what used to be my couch, but was now covered with a black throw blanket I'd never seen before. "Dad said it was cool." The mention of our father sent a spike of anger through me. "Dad said?" "Dad has nothing to do with my apartment. I pay the rent. I signed the lease." Connor shrugged again, that infuriating gesture of dismissal he'd perfected since childhood. "He's the guarantor, right? Besides, you're always saying I should get out of his house. So here I am." I closed my eyes, counted to 5, and took a deep breath. As a nurse in the ER, I'd learned to manage crisis situations without losing my cool. This was just another crisis. A deeply personal, infuriating crisis. "Connor, you can't just move into someone else's apartment without asking. You definitely can't change the locks. Where are my things?" I opened my eyes and scanned the room more carefully. "Where's my reading chair? And my bookshelf?" "Storage unit," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Most of it, anyway. Some of it wouldn't fit, so I had to get rid of it." "Get rid of it?" My voice rose an octave. "What exactly did you get rid of?" "Relax, Liz. Just some old books and that ugly lamp you had." "Oh, and those plant things were dying anyway." "My plants. My collection of succulents and herbs that I'd nurtured for years. Those weren't dying, Connor. They were thriving." "Where are they?" He gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. Tossed M. They were taking up too much space on the balcony. I needed room for the grill. I stormed to the kitchen and looked out at the small balcony. Sure enough, a large gas grill now occupied the space where my carefully arranged plant stands had been. No sign of my plants. The kitchen itself was another disaster. Dishes piled in the sink, counters sticky with spilled liquids, and my organized pantry completely ransacked. My carefully labeled containers had been replaced with open bags and boxes. "You've been here, what, a day?" I asked, my voice tight with anger. "And you've already destroyed everything?" 3 days, actually, Connor corrected, finally looking up from his phone. "And I didn't destroy anything. I improved it. This place was like a grandma's apartment before." I pressed my fingertips to my temples, feeling a headache building. After 12 hours of dealing with actual emergencies, a car crash with multiple victims, a child with severe asthma, an elderly man having a heart attack, I now had to deal with this absurdity. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, not seeing my bed anywhere. "Oh," Connor said, as if just realizing the problem. I took the bedroom. But you can have the couch. It pulls out. That was the breaking point. No, Connor. This is my apartment. I'm not sleeping on the couch. You need to leave. Now. He laughed, actually laughed, as if I'd made a joke. Come on, Liz. Don't be dramatic. Dad already paid the rent for the next 3 months. He said it was about time I had my own place, and since you're hardly ever here anyway because of your crazy hospital schedule. Dad paid my rent? I cut him off, disbelief coloring my voice. Well, technically, he paid it to me, and I paid the landlord. We put the lease in my name. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You put the lease in your name? That's not possible. I have a lease. It's not up for renewal for another 4 months. Connor had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable for the first time. Yeah, about that. I might have told the landlord that you were moving out early. Dad helped smooth things over. You lied to my landlord? The headache was pounding now, a steady throb behind my eyes. Let me get this straight. You lied to my landlord, somehow canceled my lease, signed a new one in your name, moved in without telling me, got rid of my belongings, and changed the locks. And Dad helped you do this. Connor nodded, as if this summary was completely reasonable. He said you wouldn't mind. Something about how you're always saying I need to grow up and take responsibility. I laughed, a hollow sound without humor. Taking responsibility means getting your own place legitimately, Connor. Not stealing someone else's. He rolled his eyes. I didn't steal it. We kept it in the family. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling Dad. He's at that conference in Chicago, Connor said. But whatever. He already knows you'll be mad at first. He said you'd get over it. The casual dismissal of my feelings, my rights, my very autonomy sent a wave of cold fury through me. This was so typical of both Connor and my father. Throughout my life, they'd made decisions for me, dismissed my objections, and expected me to simply accept whatever they decided was best. I dialed my father's number, unsurprised when it went straight to voicemail. Dad, call me immediately. What you and Connor have done is not okay. It's illegal, actually. I want my apartment back, and I want it back today. I hung up and turned back to Connor. Who else knows about this? Does Mom know? Connor snorted. Mom? No way. She'd flip out. It's just me, Dad, and a couple of my friends who helped move stuff. Friends? I repeated, a new sense of violation washing over me. You had your friends touching my things? Going through my personal belongings? Relax, we didn't go through your underwear drawer or anything, he said with another eye roll. Though Jason might have peeked. He's always had a thing for you. The memory of Jason Henderson, Connor's perpetually leering friend from high school, possibly rifling through my personal items made my skin crawl. I took another deep breath, trying to think logically. I needed a plan. Give me the new keys, I demanded, holding out my hand. Connor hesitated. I only have the one set right now. The landlord has the other. Give me your key, Connor. Now. Surprisingly, he reached into his pocket and handed over a single key. Fine, but I don't see what the big deal is. We could share the place. I'll even let you have the bedroom on your days off. I pocketed the key. That's not happening. You need to leave. Tonight? Where am I supposed to go? He asked, his voice taking on the whining tone he'd used since childhood to get his way. That's not my problem, I said coldly. You should have thought of that before stealing my apartment. I didn't steal. Save it, I cut him off. I'm going to take a shower in my bathroom, and when I come out, I want you packing. I headed toward what used to be my bedroom, my sanctuary after long, difficult shifts. When I opened the door, I nearly cried. The space was unrecognizable. My carefully chosen bedding was gone, replaced by rumpled dark sheets. Clothes littered the floor. The artwork I'd collected, small, meaningful pieces from local artists, had been replaced by movie posters tacked directly into the wall. My dresser was covered with empty glasses, loose change, and what appeared to be a bong. I closed the door and leaned against it, fighting back tears of frustration. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was a violation. Connor hadn't just moved in, he'd erased me from my own space. With shaking hands, I reopened the door and grabbed what I'd need for a shower. I locked myself in the bathroom, Thankfully, the one room that seemed somewhat untouched, though my carefully arranged toiletries had been shoved to one side of the counter to make room for Connor's electric razor and hair products. Under the hot spray of water, I tried to think clearly. I knew I was right, knew that what Connor and my father had done was wrong on multiple levels. But I also knew them. They'd expect me to acquiesce, to give in as I always had. To be reasonable, accommodating Eliza. Not this time. By the time I emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in my robe with my wet hair dripping down my back, I had a plan. Connor was still on the couch, now with a beer in his hand, watching something on the massive TV he'd apparently installed in my absence. "You're not packing," I observed. He glanced up. "No, I'm not." "Look, Liz, I'm sorry we didn't tell you first. That was messed up. But I'm here now and Dad's paid the rent, and it makes sense for me to have a place in the city close to the new job." "What new job?" I asked, momentarily distracted. Connor grinned. "Tech support at Dynamo Industries. Dad set it up. I start Monday." Of course he did. My father, Roger Parker, had connections throughout the city thanks to his position as a senior partner at a prominent law firm. He'd been pulling strings for Connor since my brother was old enough to start disappointing him. "That's great, Connor," I said, finding I meant it despite everything. My brother had struggled to find direction, bouncing from one half-completed endeavor to another. "I hope it works out. But you still need to find your own place." His face hardened. "This is my place now. Legally. The lease has my name on it." I nodded slowly. "We'll see about that. Where's the storage unit with my things?" He hesitated. "Crosstown. Unit 442 at Safe Store on Elmwood." "Key?" Another hesitation, longer this time. I don't have one on me." I narrowed my eyes. "Connor. It's at Dad's house, okay?" "In my room." I sighed, mentally adjusting my plan. "Fine. I need to borrow your car then." "What?" "No way. I'm not letting you take my car." "It's Dad's car," I corrected him. "And I need to get some of my things." I wasn't actually planning to go to the storage unit. Not yet, but I needed transportation. Connor groaned dramatically. "Fine, whatever. Keys are on the counter. But be careful with it. And don't go through my stuff in there." The irony of his concern for privacy was not lost on me. I got dressed quickly in the bathroom, then grabbed the car keys. "I'll be back in a couple hours." "Where are you going?" Connor called as I headed for the door. "To get what I need," I answered vaguely, closing the door behind me. My first stop was my best friend Mia's apartment, 15 minutes across town. I called her on the way, giving her the condensed version of my situation. By the time I arrived, she was waiting at the entrance to her building, concern etched on her face. "This is insane," she said after I'd filled in the details. "Your brother just took over your apartment? Can he even do that?" "Not legally, no," I said, following her into her apartment. "But my family has a way of creating their own reality and expecting everyone else to go along with it." Mia shook her head in disbelief. "So what's the plan?" "You're staying here tonight, obviously." "Thanks," I said gratefully. "But first, I need to make some calls." Over the next hour, I made 3 important phone calls. The first was to my landlord, Mr. Grayson, who was initially confused, then apologetic, and finally angry when I explained the situation. Apparently, Connor and my father had convinced him that I needed to break my lease due to a sudden job relocation and that my brother taking over would be the simplest solution for everyone. "I should have called to confirm with you directly, Ms. Parker," Mr. Grayson said. "Your father was very convincing and the paperwork appeared to be in order. But this is clearly fraudulent. I'll begin eviction proceedings immediately." "Thank you," I said. "But I'd prefer to handle this my way first, if possible." My second call was to a locksmith, who agreed to meet me at my apartment in the morning. The third call was to Sophie Green, a lawyer friend who had helped me navigate tenant issues in the past. She listened carefully, occasionally making sounds of disbelief. "This is cut and dry illegal, Eliza," she said when I finished. "Fraud, breaking and entering, destruction of property, unlawful eviction. Your father should know better, being an attorney himself." "He knows," I said grimly. "He just doesn't think the rules apply to him." Or to Connor, by extension. Do you want me to send a cease and desist letter? We could have this resolved through legal channels. I considered it. Not yet. Let me try to handle it directly first. But I might need your help soon. You've got it, Sophie assured me. Document everything. Take pictures of the apartment. Any damage to your belongings, everything. And don't sign anything your father or brother puts in front of you. Armed with legal knowledge and the support of my friends, I spent the night on Mia's couch, formulating my strategy. In the morning, after a quick stop for coffee and pastries, I returned to my apartment building. The locksmith, a middle-aged man named Ray, was waiting outside as promised. "You're sure you've got proper authorization for this?" he asked as we rode the elevator to my floor. "I don't want to get involved in any domestic disputes." I showed him my original lease, my ID with the matching address, and several utility bills in my name. My brother changed the locks without permission. "I'm simply restoring access to my legal residence." Ray nodded, satisfied. "Happens more often than you'd think. Roommates, boyfriends, girlfriends, people get crazy ideas about property rights." At the door to my apartment, I knocked first, not expecting Connor to be awake this early. To my surprise, the door swung open almost immediately. Connor stood there, looking considerably less smug than the previous evening. Behind him, I could see my father, still in his business suit despite the early hour, his silver-streaked hair perfectly combed as always. "Elizabeth," my father said, his tone the carefully controlled one he used in difficult negotiations. "We need to talk." I gestured to Ray. "This is Ray. He's here to change the locks back." My father's eyes flicked to the locksmith, then back to me. "That won't be necessary. May we speak privately?" "Actually," I said, stepping past them both into the apartment, "Ray needs to get started." "Connor, Dad, this is my apartment. I have a valid lease with 4 months remaining. What you've done is illegal on multiple levels." My father closed the door after we'd all entered, his expression hardening. "Elizabeth, you're being unreasonable. Your brother needs a place to live that's close to his new position. You're barely here due to your work schedule. This arrangement makes sense for everyone." "If it made sense for everyone," I countered, "you would have discussed it with me first." "You didn't, because you knew I would say no." "I knew you would overreact," he corrected. "As you're doing now." I turned to Ray. "Please proceed with changing the locks." Ray looked uncomfortable but nodded and began setting up his tools by the door. "Elizabeth," my father said sharply, "stop this nonsense immediately. The lease has been transferred to Connor." "It's done." Fraudulently, I replied. "I've already spoken with Mr. Grayson. He's very interested in how you misrepresented yourself and forged my signature." A flicker of uncertainty crossed my father's face before he masked it. "I did no such thing." "Then how exactly did you transfer the lease without my consent?" I challenged. Connor, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "Dad, maybe we should just let her have the apartment back. We could find me something else." My father shot him a look that immediately silenced him. "Connor needs stability right now, Elizabeth. This opportunity at Dynamo is his chance to finally establish himself. You're a successful professional with options. Your brother needs this more than you do." It was the same argument he'd made my entire life. Connor needed things more. Connor deserved special consideration. Connor required extra support. Meanwhile, I was expected to be self-sufficient, accommodating, and endlessly understanding of my brother's needs superseding my own. "My belonging, Dad," I said quietly. "The things that matter to me." Connor threw them away. "My plants that I've had for years. My books. Materials things," my father dismissed with a wave of his hand. "They can be replaced." "Not all of them," I said, thinking of the first edition novel my mother had given me before she moved across the country after the divorce, the handmade pottery from my grandmother, the plants I'd nurtured through multiple moves. "But that's not even the point. The point is that neither of you had any right to make this decision." Ray cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I've removed the current lock. Ready to install the new one whenever you say." My father's face darkened. "If you do that, I'll have you reported for illegal entry." Ray looked to me, clearly uncomfortable being caught in family drama. "Mr. Parker," I said to my father, Using the formal address he preferred in professional settings, I have documented everything. The original lease in my name, which is still valid. The utility bills in my name. The fraudulent transfer that Mr. Grayson has now acknowledged was improperly obtained. If anyone is reported for illegal entry, it will be Connor. My father's jaw tightened, a tell I recognized from childhood that indicated he was reassessing his strategy. Elizabeth, be reasonable. Think about your brother's future. I am being reasonable, I replied. Ray, please install the new lock. As Ray began working, I turned to Connor. You have 2 hours to pack your personal belongings. Anything you brought in. I expect a full accounting of what happened to my possessions, particularly the items you claim to have discarded. Connor looked to our father, who gave a slight nod. Fine, Connor muttered. I'll get my stuff. My father wasn't done, however. This is disappointing, Elizabeth. I expected more maturity from you. The familiar sting of his disapproval washed over me, but this time, I didn't let it penetrate. What's disappointing, Dad, is that you thought it was acceptable to steal my home and destroy my belongings, all to once again rescue Connor from having to face actual consequences or responsibilities. I was trying to help him start fresh, my father insisted. That job at Dynamo is a real opportunity. Then help him find his own apartment, I said. Help him learn to navigate adult life legitimately. Don't teach him that it's okay to take what belongs to others. My father's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowning. This conversation isn't over. I have a client call I need to take. He looked at Connor. Get your things. We'll discuss next steps later. As my father stepped out into the hallway to take his call, I turned to Connor, who was standing awkwardly by the couch that was once again mine. Liz, he began, his voice uncharacteristically small. I really am sorry about your plans and stuff. I didn't think. That's the problem, Connor, I cut him off. You never think about how your actions affect others. You just do whatever you want and expect everyone to accommodate you. He looked wounded. That's not fair. I'm trying to get my life together. By stealing mine? I shook my head. That's not how it works. If you want to be an adult, start by respecting other people's boundaries and property. Ray finished installing the new lock and handed me 2 sets of keys. All done. Need anything else? I paid him and thanked him for his help. Once he was gone, I surveyed the disaster that was my apartment. It would take days to undo the damage Connor had done in just 3 days. Where's the storage unit key? I asked Connor. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a small key. Here. But most of your stuff is still there. I only threw out a few things, I swear. I took the key. I'll need the address and unit number written down. While Connor wrote out the information, I began taking pictures of the apartment, documenting the changes and damages as Sophie had advised. My father returned from his call, his expression still stern but somewhat subdued. Elizabeth, he began. I don't want to hear it right now, Dad, I said firmly. You and Connor violated my trust, my home, and quite possibly the law. I need time before I'm ready to discuss this with you. To my surprise, he nodded. Fair enough. Connor, have you gathered your things? Not yet, Connor mumbled. There's a lot. Then get started, our father instructed. I'll help. For the next hour, I sat at my kitchen counter, making lists of what needed to be done, while my father and brother packed Connor's belongings. The tension in the apartment was thick, but I refused to soften, to fall into my usual role of peacemaker. This time, they would face the consequences of their actions. As they prepared to leave with the first load of Connor's things, my father approached me one last time. Elizabeth, I know you're angry, but try to see this from another perspective. Your brother is finally showing initiative, taking steps toward independence. By stealing my apartment? I retorted. That's not independence, Dad. That's the opposite. My father sighed. Perhaps our methods were misguided, but our intentions were good. Your intentions don't matter when your actions cause harm, I said quietly. You've both violated my trust in a fundamental way. That's going to take time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. For the first time, I saw genuine regret in my father's eyes. I didn't consider how this would affect you. I was focused on helping Connor. You're always focused on helping Connor, I said, the words carrying the weight of decades of similar scenarios. At some point, you need to let him help himself. And you need to recognize that I matter too. My father nodded slowly. You're right. I owe you an apology. A real one, not just words. Tell me what I can do to make this right. I considered his question. First, help Connor find his own legitimate housing. Second, replace the belongings that were destroyed, not just with money, but with the effort of finding comparable items. And third, respect that I need space from both of you right now. That's fair, my father agreed. More than fair, considering. By early afternoon, Connor and my father had removed most of Connor's belongings. My apartment was still in disarray, but at least it was mine again. As they prepared to leave with the final items, Connor approached me, his expression unusually serious. Liz, I really am sorry, he said. I didn't think about how this would affect you. I was just excited about the job and being in the city, and when Dad suggested this plan, it seemed perfect. I studied my brother, seeing past the handsome, charming exterior to the insecure young man beneath. Connor, I want you to succeed. I really do. But not at my expense. Never at someone else's expense. He nodded, looking genuinely chastened. I get that now. And I'll replace your plants. I'll find the same ones, I promise. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. Thank you. After they left, I stood in the middle of my apartment, surveying the damage. It would take time to restore my home, to reclaim my space. But I had already taken the first crucial step by standing up for myself, by refusing to be displaced from my own life. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning, rearranging furniture, and making lists of what needed to be replaced. Mia came over to help, bringing dinner and moral support. As we worked together to restore order to my apartment, I felt a strange sense of gratitude beneath my lingering anger. This violation had forced me to draw boundaries I should have established long ago. It had shown me that I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for, more capable of standing up to my family's dysfunctional patterns than I'd believed. By evening, the apartment was beginning to feel like mine again. The gaming setup was gone, my furniture was back in its proper places, though my reading chair and several other items would need to be retrieved from storage, and the worst of the mess had been cleaned up. As Mia and I sat on my couch, eating pizza and drinking wine, my phone buzzed with a text from my father, signed Connor up for a month-to-month rental in West Side Gardens. Move in tomorrow. Also ordered replacements for your books and placed an order at Greenleaf Nursery to replace your plants. More to come. I'm truly sorry, Elizabeth. I showed the message to Mia, who raised her eyebrows. That was fast. Think he means it? I considered the question. The apology? Partly. The action is what matters, though. He's trying to fix what he broke. And Connor. I sighed. Connor has a lot of growing up to do. But maybe this is a step in the right direction for him, too. As the evening wound down and Mia prepared to leave, she paused at my door. You know, Liz, you were kind of a badass today. I've never seen you stand up to your family like that. I smiled, feeling the truth of her words. It was time. After she left, I stood in my living room, still bare of many of my belongings, but undeniably mine again. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Connor. Found some of your books in my car. We'll bring them tomorrow. Also, do you know any good plant stores? I want to get the right ones. I smiled despite myself and texted back, Greenleaf on 7th Street. Ask for Maria. Tell her they're for me. Setting down my phone, I walked to the balcony door and looked out at the empty space where my plants had been. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of replacing what was lost, of rebuilding my sanctuary. But tonight, I had already reclaimed something more important, my voice, my boundaries, my home. As I prepared for bed in my own bedroom, now stripped of Connor's belongings, but still bearing the marks of his brief occupation, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The day had been challenging, emotional, and at times infuriating. But I had emerged from it stronger, clearer about what I deserved and unwilling to accept less. My brother had moved into my apartment without asking and changed the locks. But in doing so, he had inadvertently given me the push I needed to change to stop being the accommodating daughter and sister who put everyone else's needs before her own, and to start being the woman who demanded respect for her boundaries and her space. It was, I realized as I drifted off to sleep, the kind of change I had needed for a very long time.